useful for us, so thanks very much. So firstly, as I said, hello, and thanks very much for inviting us. Thanks Catherine and Ian from the Manchester Distance Learning Network for inviting us to come and talk to you about some work we've been doing over the last year, getting the University of Sheffield represented on iTunes U, which has been quite an exciting little project to be involved in. So there's the two of us here actually. There's myself, Graham McInerney. I'm in the Technology Enhanced Learning team, and so is my colleague, Mr. Zafar Ali. I don't know if shall I show you Zaf for a minute? Here he is. There you go. Zaf's very kindly offered to help out with co-moderating the session for us, which is a big help. But you may well know from your own experience when you're running these things with a few people, it doesn't hurt to have somebody helping out and keeping an eye on things like the chat window and stuff. So we're going to talk about iTunes U in a moment. Just to say that we should actually, I'm going to just make sure, if you don't mind, I'm going to take off. I'm going to ask you to disable your microphones for now, if you don't mind, just so we don't get any stray audio coming in. If you want to ask me a question, do please, or we can either save them to the end. There's the Q&A window that you can type your questions into. Also, as I said, Zaf is going to be having his eye on the chat window as well, so we can use that too. If you have a question, perhaps if you've got a specific question you want us to ask, if you can type it into this Q&A window, which is here to the right hand side of this Sheffield what's the word, logo. Right, so what are we going to do today? Well, it's all about what we'll be doing with iTunes U, and we'll start off by looking at just make sure we all understand what iTunes U is, and then we'll talk a little bit about specifically what we've been trying to do with iTunes U here at Sheffield. Lots of different institutions have got iTunes U presences and have tried to do different things with them. We're going to gloss over some of them examples. Sadly, this is not a brilliant environment for us to be playing video back to you. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at some of the web links we circulated earlier on. And if you've not had a chance to look at them thus far, do go and have a look later, because they're all different examples of instructional video made in different ways to suit different kinds of audiences for different kinds of purposes, really. So do have a look at those if you get a chance. If we get time, we'll have an activity, although it's a little bit different from the different kind of activity we can do in here as opposed to what we might do in a normal face-to-face group. But we'll give it a go anyway if we've got enough time. I'm guessing many of you will be interested in how we actually did this as a project, how we actually went around setting up iTunes U and the sort of steps you might need to take were you to do that. And then we can have a look at future directions and take some questions. I am at this moment now going to actually pause the webcam. Fortunately, I managed to not do it in the middle of pulling any more of a stupid face than I have in real life anyway. So just before we go into looking at iTunes U itself, I'm just going to ask you, please, to tell us what your experience of iTunes U is. So let me just make sure that's big enough for everybody to see. So can you just tell us, please, what your experience of iTunes U is? So maybe you've not come across it at all. You might have heard of it but not really used it. You might be using it to view content. Some of you might even be directly involved in doing that at the moment. So let's just have 30 seconds to have a quick think about that, and I'll show you the results. Great stuff. So I'll just show you the results. So as you can see, about a majority of you have used it for watching content. We've got a couple of people who are actually involved in creating it. So for those of you who are already using iTunes U, I hope I'm not completely telling you stuff that you already know or wasting your time. But let's just tuck that away now, and we'll have a quick look at what we mean by iTunes U. So for those of you who don't know, iTunes U is part of the iTunes Store, so that's the Apple online store that you use for buying music on, buying apps if you use an iOS device, possibly just buying tunes, buying videos and so on. And the most important thing about it really is it's an opportunity for universities to get themselves online and make audio visual materials available for free. And it's the for free bit that's perhaps the most important thing. So we're not looking at any kind of cost base here. It's really about just giving this material away, and we'll look at the implications of that, or why we do that, in a moment. You can access it via a number of routes. So on a PC or a Mac you can access it using the iTunes software. If you have an iOS device, there's a iTunes U app, and if you use an Android device, there's also another freely available app called TuneSpace, which is free from the Play Store. So let's just have a very quick look. I'm going to take a slight gamble here. We're going to try and share out the app. If it all goes horribly wrong, we will think of a fallback position. So just 2 secs while we get that on. Let's try that again. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Let's just do that again, sorry. I need to switch to menu control. That's more like it. Sorry about that, folks. So here we are. Here's the iTunes U store, as it is as you log into it. Let's make sure that's all up there. We can see some great British cultural icons here, like X Factor, and I noticed Jerry Essex presents Party Tunes, and Take That, I've got a new album out, so good to see all those things being represented. And what there should actually be, that seems to be missing at the moment, is a link through to iTunes U. But normally on the menu, don't know why mine's not showing, there would be a link through to iTunes U on the top. Don't know what's going on there. Not to worry, we'll come back to that in a little while. We're going to look at some more examples of that in a moment. So there it is. So and then that's just the 2 screenshots. What you should have actually seen is a menu item there to click on that says iTunes U. And this is the iTunes U homepage. Similar idea, so you have featured content along the top, and some new and notable items here. We will try and have a look at that again later on, so we might just have to have a quick investigate as to what's going on with my iTunes U there. So I did say the main emphasis of this is that we are making content available for free. So one obvious question is, well, why would we want to do this? Why would we put resources into making educational materials available for free? Especially, you might say, in what might be perceived as a climate of competition, or competition and fees. And there's a very strong driver for this within our university. And that's that it's absolutely core to the University of Sheffield's mission that we are a public body. The University of Sheffield was famously founded on the donations of people who live in Sheffield. Everybody donated, not everyone, but many people from the city donated money towards the foundation of having a university in their city. And we basically believe, as a university, we have a responsibility to share knowledge with the world around us, and that could be the people of Sheffield, people across the rest of the UK, or people around the world more broadly. We work very hard on a number of key projects here that are really aimed at tackling some of the world's most important problems, and it's our duty to share that out with people. That's a very strong political message that comes from our Vice-Chancellor, our senior management here at the university. Having said that, there's also no doubt that a project like iTunes U has the capacity to raise the international profile of individuals, colleagues, raises the profiles of people's subjects, the departments, and of course the broader university. So that would be perhaps a more of a marketing imperative. And just for interest, actually, I'm just going to ask you now whether your own university has an iTunes U presence. So let me just ask you to consider this. Tell me, does your university have an iTunes U presence? Okay, I think most of you voted there, so let's have a look. So it's about an equal third split. Interestingly, some of you you may not be aware whether your university does, so that's an interesting perspective, I think. So that's great. That's good to know. We'll just end that poll now, and we'll go through. So, looking at international profile, because we're talking about raising the profile of people in the university. Since iTunes U came along, which was actually in America in about 2005, slightly later in Britain, 2008 I think, a number of key international players have got on board with it. Certainly the kinds of institutions that University of Sheffield would either aspire to be like or would consider itself to be like, so places like Berkeley, Harvard, UCLA, Stanford, and so on. And then looking within the UK, the University of Sheffield is a Russell Group member, and therefore would see other Russell Group members as a direct comparator. Oh, thank you very much. I see we've got a few. Sally, yes, I know, and Tom, I know about your spaces at LSE. There, we've got you down here. In fact, Nottingham and LSE next to each other. So thanks, Sally, and thanks, Tom. We were probably the last of the current batch of Russell Group universities to come on to iTunes U. So we perceived there was a bit of a gap, a Sheffield space gap in that particular space, and so we have. No, thanks, Tracy. Yeah, pedagogy is something that we're going to come on to in a moment. I'm only seeing the first. Is business and marketing tool within Sheffield? No, no, Tracy. Just to make that point again, if I go back a couple of slides, our primary driver is this one. It's our responsibility to share knowledge with the world. We don't see it as a marketing tool. We see it as an indirect marketing tool, of course, because it will raise the profile. But it really is about providing an outward-facing presence, which enables us to engage with the people around us. But thanks, that's a good question, because it's always a tension, I think, with these things. In terms of the actual input of this, we'll just have a quick look at Oxford statistics. Oxford were one of the first universities to, in fact, the first university in Britain, I think, to come on board with iTunes U. They were specifically invited by Apple to do it when Apple launched. And they have boasted some truly awesome statistics, actually, in terms of how many people have actually come onto it. So, in the last 6 years, they've had 23 million downloads, which is a huge quantity. 4,500 podcast items they've got on there. That's individual items of content. That equates to 5,500 hours of material, and there's nearly 5,000 members of their staff from across the colleges have come on board and contributed. And in terms of it being a potentially a global audience, they've had access from over 185 answers. Sorry, Janet. Yes. In terms of the Q&A, if you actually click on the Q&A, I think they expand out to see the full screen. And at the time, when Apple were quite keen to market the existence of iTunes U as a no doubt as a promotional tool for Apple, they featured in that, and we'll talk about how Apple market bits of content again in a moment. And Zaf is going to make sure that I do read them out. Yes, thank you. Thanks very much for that. Now, you might wonder, well, it's not the only way of making content available to people, and another very obvious one is YouTube. So, I was wondering, do you or your colleagues perhaps currently put materials in YouTube? So let's have a quick. Oh, it's frozen on me for a minute. Let's just have a quick poll on that. So who's currently using YouTube? Oh, my machine's just gone really slow. A little clarification on what we're doing with the Q&A. So do please do the Q&A or put them into the chat. I will read them out and try and answer them as we go on, or I'll read them out as Zafar said, and we'll do them at the end. So a good number of you, actually 80% or so, putting materials into YouTube. So why then would you use, what is the comparison between iTunes U and YouTube? Well, there's absolutely no doubt that they both offer audio and video and content for free, and YouTube is phenomenal. The kind of statistics that people can say about YouTube are pretty mind-blowing. Millions and millions of hours of content. There'll probably be I think there'll be 100 hours of new content uploaded to YouTube during the duration of this webinar alone. It's quite fantastic. Even 4 or 5 years ago, it was a fact that it would be impossible for any single person to watch all the content on YouTube in their entire lifetime. That's if they did absolutely nothing else in their entire life apart from watch YouTube, including going to sleep, eating, and so on. So obviously, it's a huge thing. It's also worth knowing, actually, I don't know if you know this, somebody from our marketing team told me the other day that YouTube is the second most used search engine in the world. So the kind of how to do ... is phenomenal. It really is. Apart from Google's main search engine, it's the biggest hit search engine. So the way we tend to think about it is to think about channels. So for a start, it doesn't have to be a binary opposition between do I use iTunes U, or do I use YouTube, or do I use Vimeo, or do I use another channel, because they are channels. The analogy I tend to try and think of it with, or try and use to describe it, is to think about perhaps if you were the director general of the BBC, or you're in charge of programming for BBC, you'd have 4 or 5 channels, and you'd have a raft of different types of content, and you'd actually put those different bits of content out via different channels as appropriate. So, for example, you would put the news probably on every channel, but certain sort of specialist academic type programming you might put on BBC4. Other forms of popular entertainment channels you might put on BBC1, and then there would be some grey areas between. So firstly, I wouldn't say, don't think of it as like a binary opposition, if you like. Very importantly, iTunes U is not currently blocked in China. Now that's not a simple black and white position, because actually different provinces in China block different services at different times, but by and large, certainly the Apple hosted stuff that we use isn't blocked in China at the moment. So if the Chinese audience, if you like, is an important one to you, then that's something worth thinking about. One of the other things about iTunes U content is you can make content downloadable in the way that you wouldn't normally do with YouTube, and that can be very useful in certain pedagogical contexts, such as if you're providing material for people who do field work, and we have a specific example of that, which I might be able to show you in a little while, which is providing video instructional material for archaeology students who go out on field trips. iTunes U content can also be structured in something analogous to a course. YouTube is a little less obviously structured. And the other thing about YouTube, which I don't think I'm going to try and demonstrate to you now, is that it can have distractions. So there's lots of other stuff out there as well. Now, we've heard a question about MOOCs, Stephen, and thanks very much for that, because that's the other obvious comparator. So we have had some investment of effort in putting MOOCs on in Sheffield, going through the FutureLearn platform. So let's just have another quick poll. Whose institution are involved in? Oh, you got that stuff, yeah. Oh, hello. We decided to join the FutureLearn consortium about 18 months ago, and so we've had 4 or 5 MOOCs produced with them. Again, there's an obvious overlap between the MOOCs environment and the iTunes U environment. Okay. So we can just see the results there. About 65% of you have been doing MOOCs. So again, that's a good number. Again, it's interesting to think about perhaps what one's institutional motivation behind doing MOOCs is. And again, like iTunes U, I think, if we were having a discussion about this, and I've seen some of you have already put in your chat windows that in your institutions you think these are very much of a marketing initiative rather than a academic one. I'm just going to put that to one side now. So again, what's the difference between putting stuff in iTunes U and putting stuff in a MOOC? So MOOCs tend to be very structured in terms of a weekly curriculum, if you like, and often, certainly in the FutureLearn platform, we're providing assessment activities such as self-assessment quizzes, lots of emphasis around writing blog postings and so on. And also there's a very much direct encouragement for people to interact with others, often using third-party sort of off-platform social networking tools, Google Plus, Hangouts, and so on. Just having a look at. Oh yeah, okay. It's interesting what you're seeing there, Leander. That's probably something a little bit like ours. And in the FutureLearn platform, you can pay a small amount of money, or you can get some certification for your completion. iTunes U is similar, but a little bit different. So I would say it's a little bit flatter in its structure, not quite so rigorously structured. You can group your content together in collections, which could be analogous to courses, but they don't have to be. There's no strict timetable of usage. There's no formal support or assessment, certainly here. and there's no certification. So again, similar, and there are ways of opening up the Academy to the wider world, but different in their implementation. So what does iTunes U mean to us, or rather more specifically the UOS, the University of Sheffield? And so when I was asked to take this project on, I thought it was a good idea to have a very strong vision as to what it meant for us. And I've already said, again, just to, without wishing to labour the point too much, we do see this as purely as an exercise in sharing our responsibility as academics to share knowledge with the world around us. And in doing so, we really wanted iTunes U to be a way for us to take what we believe as being the fantastic diversity of the things we think makes the University of Sheffield excellent, and to try and distill that and make that available to people in a digital form. So a fairly high level, grandiose aim. One of my colleagues a while ago tried to do a kind of a mapping of what it was that we could do in iTunes U, and he sort of got X amount through this mind map, and it quickly gets kind of quite bewildering. So one of the things we decided we wanted to do, and I'll mention this again towards the end, is we needed to have a content strategy, a way of thinking about what sort of material is actually sensible. So the areas of excellence we decided we want our iTunes U presence to talk about is excellence in learning and teaching, excellence in research, excellence in public engagement, outreach, which is very important to us, and I think it's very important to everybody in the higher education community, because we need to be very conscious of those who want to come to university, and convincing people that university and higher education is a valid course of action, a valid path to choose in life. We're also very conscious of the importance of supporting the student experience. The University of Sheffield last year won the Times Higher #1 award for excellence of student experience. So again, that's something we want to celebrate. And we're also very keen to develop this as a route for student-generated materials. So, and this latter point bears a bit of explanation. We haven't done so much of it yet, but here at the University of Sheffield we have a very strong commitment to encouraging students to be generating digitally created materials. So for example, as a form of assessment, we have quite a few modules now where as an alternative to perhaps doing a group presentation or an essay, we encourage groups of students to produce podcasts, to produce screencasts, to produce and edit videos and so on, because we believe it's a very powerful way of learning. And again, we want students to understand that if they do that well, they've got the opportunity to contribute to our digital presence. And that's quite important. So in Sheffield then, we've organised all our materials together into collections. We've not made use of the course builder feature as of yet here in Sheffield, so they're all straight iTunes U collections, which we'll have a look at in a moment. We're using audio, video and screencasts. We can also add PDFs and ebooks, and we've got some examples of we're using PDFs to back up audiovisual resources, and in fact in one collection from our Social, Political and Economic Research Institute we have a collection made exclusively of PDFs. And collections all have a cover art, and also very importantly when you're putting collections together, the use of metadata. So I'm just going to try and call up our Sheffield on iTunes U site now for you, and I can show you a couple of key features of it. There we go. Right, so I'm hoping we can get this to behave itself a bit better this time. Let's just see whether we've got that going now. Right, just make sure that's all working. Are we there yet? No. Yes. On yours, yes. Sorry, we're just having a little, mine's not working on my preview. Yes, indeed, I've got it going now. So thanks for bearing with me. So here we go, Sheffield banner. We've divided up as such, so we've got our featured content here. And if we go in to have a look at one of these, I'm just going to look at an example piece of content just so you understand how it's laid out for those of you who don't know. So this is an introduction to animal behaviour. We did this as an introduction with one of our quite well-known academics, a guy called Professor Tim Burkhead, who anybody who's into ornithology or bird behaviour may well have heard of. He's a very well-known public engager, if you like. Is also very well known for work in behavioural ecology. So this was to support his first year course, which is Introduction to Animal Behaviour. So each piece of content has this cover art, and we'll talk about that again in a moment. The metadata is very important, so the description, for example, tells you what's in there. Also, each particular item also has some metadata, and this again is important because when people are searching through iTunes, all this information is searchable. And then if I'm just going to click this isn't going to work ever so well. You won't be able to hear the audio, but you can also see that hopefully that each piece of content is actually branded in a certain sort of way. I'm just going to come back to the presentation because in the absence of being able to hear the hello folks, sorry about that. I think we might have, yes, I think we may have lost you for a minute. I'm just going to quickly refresh my screens and hopefully the presentation, which seems to have disappeared. Hold on a minute. I think we'll hold off trying to show any more examples of that because that's twice it's died. Sorry about that. Has anybody got any questions just while we're whilst we're getting back to where we were? Back. Thanks, Gemma. Da da da. Okay, so let's get into the pedagogy of it now, because I know people are interested in pedagogy rather than just looking at the glossy side of it. So I'm not going to demonstrate these now, certainly after that. I would urge you to have a look at these, and in fact, if I just quickly show you the web links pod again, you might just want to have a look at these. So let me just pull up my preview window. So the first one I'm going to show you is something called Introduction to Model Analysis and Control, which is on the second list. And these are a series of screencast tutorials that were prepared by one of our engineering colleagues, and he's actually done about 200 of these. And each screencast is divided up into 10 sections, 10 broad collections, and it's intended to provide support for a number of modules he teaches on engineering mathematics, particularly the mathematics regarding or going around feedback and control. And what Anthony does is he actually records these using Echo 360 and a digitizing tablet. We have a site license for Echo 360, so as a software cost to him, it's actually nothing. And he simply sits down, he knocks up his examples in PowerPoint, and he I'll come on to that in a moment, Gemma, because we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. We have a spectrum, which I'm going to take you through now. So this first example is actually very much a kind of homegrown example. The lecturer himself devised the problems in PowerPoint, and he then actually goes through them and he annotates the screen using a digitizing tablet, which works quite nicely. So in fact, these are actually home produced, very useful. And what he actually does is he uses these in a kind of flipped environment. So the gland hound and the globe. All right. And what he does is he gets the students to actually watch these videos before classes, and he managed to get them to do this quite successfully. So rather than him actually standing up and writing through the solutions up on the board, which is a kind of very traditional math/engineering approach, he actually gets them to come together and do more problem-based group activities, which he then also backs up using clickers in the class. These are our second most popularly accessed iTunes content that we have on our site at the moment. We'll come back to the first one in a moment. The second one is something I'd urge you to look at. It's a very different kind of approach, and the idea here is this is a collection called We Are Feminists, and the point here is that video and audio, in fact, pedagogically provides another fantastic opportunity for teaching, which is to bring different interpretations and different voices into the student's experience. So at higher education level, many of us teach topics which are worthy of adopting different interpretive perspectives, if you like. And so what they do in this particular episode, in this particular collection, is that they have a number of different lecturers from the School of English come and talk about why they believe feminism is important in the study of literature. I'm just going to start the webcam again. So that's a really useful one. So do have a look at that. And basically, in terms of who make the video, these are actually shot by a learning technologist colleague in the department who simply arranged to go around and film these with the individual lecturers. They're just filmed in their office. They're little 3-minute vignette pieces to camera where the academic explains their perspective. Now, going to the other end of the spectrum, this is the example I mentioned before. This is what we call iDig, and this is some instructional video which teaches archaeology students the practical techniques of archaeology fieldwork. Very important skills to learn if you're doing an archaeology degree. The problem is with fieldwork, as anybody who's taught any field work before, is that it's logistically difficult to do. It's also very expensive. And there's a great emphasis on the importance of making fieldwork education and fieldwork learning experiences as useful as they can possibly be. The great thing about putting stuff on iTunes, as we've done here, is the students can download these instructional videos to their phones, irrespective of the platform, and they can actually take them with them out into the field. We tend to take our students to places like the Peak District, and so on, lots of places where we don't traditionally have very good internet access. So rather than being solely reliant on providing devices for people with content on, we do encourage the students to actually download this. Again, this is another quite popular bit of our content. And then it's also worth bearing in mind it doesn't all have to be video. Audio, of course, is a very powerful medium in a number of different disciplines. And language learning is a classic example. So these are some podcasts that were made by our School of Modern Languages to teach basic pronunciation and conversational techniques in Italian. I talked about the student experience, and I'm sorry I'm going to have to skirt through this very quickly. The Virtual Graduate School is a collection of videos made based around interviews either with PhD students or PhD supervisors to support our graduate students through the process of doing a PhD, and they typically cover topics such as research supervision, literature searching, thesis writing, and dealing with the dreaded Viva situation as well, which of course is a very important experience. And then we've got a nice example which we've just released, which is an outreach example, which is called Discover Study Skills Online. And these were actually made by one of our students, who is a very gifted video maker in our chemistry department of all places. And he's actually made these videos over the summer in conjunction with our outreach department. And these are aimed specifically at A-level students coming into university to help them understand and deal with the transition of going from school-based learning to university learning. And then the one final example I'm going to draw our attention to is this one here, which is called Sounds of the Cosmos. We have a very strong public engagement drive, if you like, in the university. I did mention earlier on that our chief motivation for this was to share stuff with the broader community, and we have a very active public engagement team. And every couple of years, well, we just run our second iteration of it. We run a big public engagement festival called the Festival of the Mind, and this was a performance that was the opening flagship performance of this, whereby our university orchestra performed the Planet Suite in a concert hall that was converted into a mini planetarium with 8 projectors, and the performances were accompanied by films composited from graphics that come from NASA and the European Space Agency. And then in between each movement, Professor Paul Crowther, who's a leading astronomer and professor in our astronomy department, gave a 10-minute lecture on topics ranging from the solar system, the planets, going out into the broader galaxy, Milky Way, and other cosmological phenomena. And that's been quite a success. Yes, sorry, Sally, it is. We're going to come on to... Oh, sorry. So Sally's just asked if Sheffield Content is Apple hosted or do we host. Sally, actually, you may remember I contacted you a while ago about this. We're actually using the Apple hosting. I am actually going to talk specifically about that in a couple of slides' time, so I'll come on to that. Also from Tom. Does Sheffield produce? Okay. They're Apple hosted. Yeah. Let me talk about the hosting and the tech aspects of this in a while, because that's something that we're going to address. Just a big question though. What all of this, of course, raises is pedagogically and in other senses who is the audience that we're targeting, and that's actually an interesting question that you could ask of iTunes U in general, because it's not always the easiest one to answer, but we'll come on to it in a moment. How big is the team at Sheffield, part-time or half-time? We're just undergoing some changes, but in the last year, the team has basically been myself and a colleague here in our IT department who makes the videos with me. It's shared now. It's actually in the middle of being changed, but yes, it's been quite a small team. There's just been myself and another colleague really mainly working on it. Although that's been working on producing bespoke content specifically for the package. We've actually done quite a bit of work on curating material that's already been in existence. How do we extract the material from Echo 360 for use on iTunes U? Is any part of the process automated or is it completely manual process? Now, actually, I think most of the material that we've got from Echo 360 so far was actually provided to us by the lecturer who'd done it, and he'd actually already converted the files into M4V files for us. So we re-encoded them and branded them for the site. I was going to just suggest actually for 1 minute. I'm going to go back to this. Literally 1 minute, 2 minute ideas I put, but I'm going to half that Let's do 1 minute. Just have a quick idea from each of you. Just think of something that you're involved in, and just in one sentence in the chat window, think of an idea in the next minute that you think you could do or contribute to an iTunes. Imagine you have a fantasy iTunes U presence. You've got some kind of video or audio you want to say. What would that be? Okay, folks, you can come back to that if you want. I'm just slightly conscious of the time, especially with the thing dropping out earlier on. We just inherited a little bit of a delay. Great to hear your ideas. I think you're probably going to find that you can be limited by imagination, but or only limited by imagination, but the typical kind of answers we get would be lecture recordings, whether those are timetable ones or special events. Special events are always good if you've got an external speaker. We mentioned this idea of specialist interviews or discussions with colleagues, and that's that pedagogical idea of bringing multiple interpretations, multiple viewpoints into the student experience. Instructional videos, things that actually teach things, are always very popular. Screencasted tutorials because they're nice and simple and cheap to make. Providing resources to people on distant locations, whether that be fieldwork or work placements, again, all good stuff, and so on. Oops, I can't see anything. Right, so the other sort of big thing we've had to wrestle with, which I'll come back onto in a moment, although this is now changing, is this idea that material does need to be legal. So whilst the law has changed and we're still trying to get our heads around the full implications of what it means for stuff like MOOCs and iTunes U, we still need to be aware of copyright infringements. We believe the law's relaxed a bit now, but perhaps maybe not as much as we like to think. And we also have to get our contributors to consent, and that's important because they need to effectively, we get our contributors to license their performance rights. So very quick review of what we've done so far. We've now got over 600 items divvied up into about 75 plus collections. All our Sheffield-based faculties have been represented, but we've also been very keen to get professional services involved in as well. So, for example, we've got colleagues from information management, library, so on. Copyright experts have done some quite nice work on explanations of copyright. And we haven't got anything like the same statistics as Oxford, so again, this is an important pragmatic point. you have the capacity to get huge hits, but it doesn't mean you will automatically get huge hits. We've had about 20,000 streams and 24,000 downloads since we opened in the last year, and 32,000 visitors. However, 10,000 of those downloads and 19,000 of those visitors have actually just been in the last month, which is really quite significant, and I'll show you why in a moment. So something like 24,000 downloads actually, within the context of say the university's YouTube channel, that's here, that's not actually a huge amount. 5.5 subscriptions is about the same. So in terms of how it performs up against something like YouTube, it's still early days. We talked about global access, and as you can see from this, these are access stats that we got from Apple's servers. The UK audience only accounts for about 20% of our total at the moment, and we're getting a lot of hits from China, a lot of hits from the States, as well as a good old mixture of other countries as well. This was our access statistics over the last year up until September, so we're sort of fairly moderate. Some of these figures here correspond to peaks in access of the engineering material I was talking to you about earlier on, as do these. In fact, I think one of these peaks is also to do with a peak in fact it was the July peak here, sorry. Was a peak in people downloading the archaeology material because it corresponded with lots of people going off on field trips, so lots more people access that. But it's still fairly modest figures, you could say. And these are our most popular items here. First order modelling, it's a lot of the engineering stuff. Something here, the Lyric Festival is a national festival of poetry that we have. That's been quite popular as well. And then in November, I mentioned earlier on the Sounds of the Cosmos and said I was going to come back to discuss this again. At the end of then in November, when we finished producing this, I actually wrote to Apple and pitched this to them. They told us in the past that they like to have new and notable stuff on their homepage, and if ever we'd done something that they might like, we should share it with them. So we did. We weren't quite expecting them to share it like this though, and put it as a huge big banner. Anyway, the effect on our statistics has been phenomenal. So the graph I showed you before is up to this point, and then this is where it basically really explodes into life in and around November. And as I said, these green dots here are number of site visitors, and just this peak here accounted for 19,000 visitors. And if we go to the next page, we can see that we've actually had a huge hit on these. So that just goes to show that if you get the stuff picked up by Apple, which they will occasionally do, it can have a huge hit. Okay, very quickly, because I realise we need time for questions, just the process that you might want to go through if you're thinking about doing this for yourself. We set up a steering group. You need to have a content strategy. You need to think about IPR. You need to think about a visual identity, because it has the capacity to have a very visual presence, so don't be shy of that, I guess. And then there's technical matters, which again a few of you asked about, branding and transcoding and so on. So we got senior managers together. We had a Pro Vice Chancellor for Learning and Teaching, an academic lead. You also want to bring marketing and PR people in. In fact, our iTunes U project is at this moment in time based in our marketing department. You need technical and IT people, and of course you need content producers, people with video making expertise, and academic staff on board as well. One of the things about iTunes U, and I mean Sally might agree with this, and other people who've done it as well, it does actually provide an opportunity for people to come out of silos and genuinely work on a kind of collective shared enterprise. So that is a good sort of unintentional outcome of doing a project like this. I mentioned to you before, we identify these key areas, and having the content strategy is the most important thing. Again, someone asked earlier on about marketing and promotion. I think you can all, if you scrutinise this slide for a few moments, you'll all see that the words marketing or promotion are not listed. As I said, for us it's very much about academic engagement, about sharing the academic work of the university. It's really helpful to have a content strategy if you're doing this kind of thing, because it makes it much easier for you to decide what kind of material to have and what not to have. So we've been approached by a few people who have basically had promotional videos for their department, and we've basically said that we won't put them on, and we tell them to put them on their own YouTube channels instead, because we really, for us, iTunes U is about the academic commons. It's about getting academic stuff out there and not about promotional material. I know that regulations regarding third-party copyright have changed recently, and we're still getting to grips with those. However, don't underestimate the importance of considering intellectual property of your contributors, particularly those of performance rights, because people have rights as performers which you need to get them to agree to share with you. So that's very important, and it takes a long time to work through some of this stuff actually, and again, a lot of it depends on how it has a lot to do with what contractual arrangements already exist. So in answer to your question, Sue, that's a very good question. Sue Burnett from University of South Wales is asking us, do we have any issues with academics not wanting to share? Actually, I'm just going to say if I can, if we had any issues with people not wanting to share. The way we tackled that, Sue, was we were very clear to make sure that people understood that when they signed up to work with us, they were not giving away their copyright, or they were not giving away their intellectual property, but all they were actually doing is licensing the university to use their material. So basically they're agreeing to share the copyright of the distribution, if you like, of the material with the university. And if people are interested in seeing our consent forms, I'm more than happy to share them out. We put a lot of work into going through them, trying to get what we felt was something that worked well for all our colleagues. And again, it's really important for us that our colleagues feel that they've got co-ownership of this with us, so we didn't want to kind of them to think we were taking anything away from them. But again, it does depend partly on what your baseline contracts with your staff is as well. So that's an important thing to bear in mind. If people would find it useful to get a copy of that, I'm just trying to think. I will find one for you. I'll do it at the end actually, because we've actually got it on our iTunes U website, which I was going to show you anyway. Sue, does that answer your question, or do you want me to explain more about that? So I can see you typing. I'll just go on to the next slide, Sue, if that's okay. Visual identity is very important, as I said. Because it's a very visual interface, there is a fantastic opportunity, if you like, to present something that's very appealing, and we're very happy with the visual identity that we've managed to achieve with ours. In fact, we were congratulated by Apple on having a very good looking site, which was very pleasing. We'll have, yes, we have copyright on ours too, Sue, just to make sure that people understand that if they are agreeing, they're also agreeing to play fair and not get us done for clumsy copyright infringements. Having said that, so let's go back to visual identity. We've put a lot of effort into designing a nice overall look and feel. We actually paid a very reputable design company in Sheffield called Human Studio to design it for us. We also put a lot of effort into the individual icons, these kinds of things here. So each one of our items will have this black on black. That's not a very good choice, is it? Let me just go red. That's it. Each one of these logos has a kind of a fairly standard thing, which has got this Sheffield thing across the top. And what I've been doing to try and make things look a little bit distinctive is the bottom area here. We very often will actually grab a frame from the particular video itself, which means it gives it something that's very unique. It means it's not just loads of crappy corporate stock images which are really tedious. And again, if you look back on our home site, I hope you like what you see there. So that's something. That's quite a good fun part of the job as well, getting to design some nice looking icons. Now for the technical questions, You asked us about hosting, so the way you're going to tackle this really depends on what infrastructure you may already have in place. We did not, at the time of starting our iTunes U project, have a suitable hosting and delivery platform in-house, so we found ourselves taking advantage of the Apple hosting platform. Here is, in fact, for those of you who've used iTunes U, here is a picture of the iTunes U feed editor. We had a question about RSS earlier. When you go in and you create collections in the iTunes U Personal Site Manager, it generates the iTunes U compatible RSS data for you. However, the downside of that is that Apple don't let you use the RSS data outside of their environment. We did at one point think that we would be able to get away with hosting all our content with Apple, pulling the RSS off it and then putting it on our own website, but I was told quite well that just wasn't technically possible to do that. So we're currently using Apple hosting. Now there's obviously an issue with that, which is we can only use this content or deploy this content, broadly speaking, through the iTunes ecosystem, if you like. What that prevents us doing is doing, for example, what Oxford have done, which we've got a fantastic example of how to really do it, is what they've done at Oxford, and I think Sally has at Nottingham as well, which is to have an open web face mirror of the iTunes U collection. In order for us to be able to do that, we need to put our material somewhere else. And what we actually want to do is move towards what we call a produce once, publish many option. We're not there yet. That would mean being in a situation where we can produce some video content, we can put it on our server, and then we can just tell the server to push it out to the channels that we want. Transcoding, moving materials around, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it gets extremely time consuming when you've got a lot of content to deal with. We had an earlier question about producing video. So this is how we support it in terms of getting the content out there. We have myself, or had myself, I'm not doing it anymore now, but we have colleagues who are working specifically to support this, and they're in our creative media team. And we're helping people in a number of different ways. Firstly, yes, we are making some bespoke items ourselves, and that's been myself and another co-producer, Tom Foster, who's also an excellent cameraman and video editor. We've been actually producing content with academics. But of course, to be sustainable and to really kind of get this more of a grassroots cultural movement going, where people feel that they can actually start thinking about producing audiovisual material as a normal part of academic practice, we need to build up capability in-house. We need to build up a sustainable sort of self-reliant approach. So we're trying to support people as best we can. So we have a thing called the Creative Media Suite and the Creative Media Team. And what they're able to do for people is they can loan out equipment in the form of camcorders and audio recorders. They provide thank you, Saf. They provide access to editing facilities, so we've got a suite of machines where people can go and use dedicated editing hardware and software. We provide general support and advice for people who might want to know how to structure a video or a podcast. As I said, we do direct support for production, which means doing stuff, again, particularly around things like event recording and so on. And also, we're very keen on training and supporting students. I mentioned earlier on, we believe student creativity is a very powerful tool pedagogically, and we're very keen to encourage that as well. I mentioned also earlier on the consent form. This is our website if you want to have a look at that. If I can, I'm just trying to think if I can copy the text from that. No, I can't. I just crossed it out. That wasn't very clever, was it? Let's get rid of that. What I'll do is I'll put this in the web links for you. Actually, why don't I do it now? Zaf's going to do it. He's going to put that in the web links, and we'll show that again. This is our support site, so it takes people through. It's really aimed at people within the university who want to get involved with iTunes U. Tells them the sort of thing they need to know, what sort of content we want from people, so outlining that content strategy. A gallery of examples, access to the consent form, and an explanation of the consent form, because that's very important for people too, as well as other technical information. We've done things like provided some encoding presets so people can save the the videos in the right format, apply the branding, and so on. And I think where we're actually going with this more broadly, and again, is it marketing, is it academic? And again, our perception is very much one of it being an academic venture, and we're really trying to get people to think not so much now about iTunes U as a specific platform, but really rather more about the use of audio-visual material to tell the academic story. And a number of our more recent content actually speak to that. Speak to that audience. One of my laptops tell me it's on reserve power. So again, that's really important to us. We want people to think less now about, oh, is this iTunes U or is it YouTube, but think more about just thinking about how to do actual content. I shall just pull the web links to one side for a minute because it's just blowing the get it to dock. It will dock for me neatly if I get it to do that. Thank you. And again, very interested in this idea of producing once and publishing many. And coming back to the question about hosting, we've been slightly locked into the iTunes platform so far because we've hosted all our material there. Once we get a hosting platform that's less bound to that one platform, that will open up the way we can produce. So I've realised I've gone over a little bit. And I'm very happy to take some questions now. So okay, Tracy, that's a very good question. One of the things to bear in mind, just going to read that out again. Tracy Duffy is asking us, have we had any issues with non-Apple devices being owned by students who want to access the content in a mobile environment? One of the things I didn't perhaps make as clear as I could have done is that we have really been thinking of this as a platform for those outside the university. So we're not really using our iTunes U as a means of delivering module or sort of course-specific content to our inward-facing audience. By and large, with the possible exception of the mobile field training and the engineering stuff, we'd be very much thinking about an outward-facing audience. So actually, I guess in a nutshell, no, we haven't. We haven't had to face up to that problem head-on. We do, as I say, let people know that they can access material off the Android platform as well, using the TuneSpace tool as well as the iTunes U one. I don't know if that answers your question, Tracy. I'm just going to pop this web links back in now. Thank you. Anybody else got any other questions? I don't know, I might switch the camera back on now. Will Stewart, good old Will. How are you doing, Will? Here's the website again if people want to know, and if you wanted to ask me anything about this afterwards, do please contact me at that email address. Thanks very much, Will, that's very kind of you. What next? iTunes U courses with outreach. Thanks very much, Sue. That's been very kind of you. Yes, we do with the outreach. So if you're talking about schools outreach, we've got a couple of things we can talk about there, Stephen. Stephen, you've seen it in the chat window. Stephen's asked about outreach. If we're talking about schools outreach, which is our interpretation of the word outreach, yes, we've been doing the work to discover study skills online, which I mentioned to you earlier on, and we actually devised this in conjunction with 100 schools in the Sheffield region that we work with our outreach team, and we actually negotiated with them what kind of content they felt they actually, thanks Stephen, yes schools, what sort of content they felt would actually be really useful for their A-level students to start thinking about that very important transition to school. So there's one example. You're looking at STEM subjects in particular, okay. And Not directly yet, but I think that's something we'll be working on. A good example there for STEM subjects would be the engineering maths. I think a lot of that content would be usable certainly by A-level students or AS-level students. I did engineering, no, I did maths and physics at school, although I did find the entire experience somewhat bewildering. And only barely passed my A-levels. Looking at the work that Anthony's done, I do recognise a lot of that stuff. So at his first year level, that would be good. We've also been putting on events for school teachers. Now, it's albeit in our Faculty of Arts rather than any of the STEM subjects, we are actually going to extend this to maths. And we hold a series of teachers' conference during the summer. And the idea there is that we get experts in from bodies like AQA, for example, to come and focus on telling teachers from our network of about 100 schools. The idea there is it's to get teachers to get up to speed with new topics that will be coming onto the curriculum and changes that come onto the curriculum, which the teachers themselves probably wouldn't have actually done at university. So, for example, in June we had a modern languages teachers conference, a history teachers conference, an English and a philosophy one. And the idea there is the school teachers come in and they hear from academic lecturers in those departments. They're giving them some right new up to date information about the latest developments in those particular fields. Great stuff. Is there a recording of our session? I've got a question from FLSC-LTC. Is there a recording of a session? May I please share it with my colleagues and the faculty may be interested? Absolutely. We're doing this one in Connect, so what we'll have to do is we'll have to pull the recording down, and I think we may have to, sorry about that, I think we may have to perhaps reformat it. Sorry. I did wonder what it was. So Shari, yes, we can absolutely, we'll make that available for you, and I will publicise that via Ian and Catherine. We'll put it somewhere. We could even put it on our own iTunes U site, although that might be a bit meta, as in a sort of meta something, a bit too much. Work title, brilliant. Thank you. So yes, we will make that available to you. I would encourage people. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues around here, and I'm just going to say this while I'm waiting for anybody else to put some questions in, is it comes back to this whole position of what you want to use it for. You can use it for distance learning. You can use it for making content available outside of your virtual learning environment to non-enrolled students, because that is always a bit of a gotcha, or it can be. Yes, Sue, definitely. We will be able to notify by email. I shall ask Ian Miller and Catherine from the MaDLeN network to see if they can do that for us. So it becomes this big, almost a philosophical or values-based, I would call it in fact a values-based question as to what you want to use this for. As I said, for me, I have absolutely no doubt. This is about opening up the university to a broader population of people who just wouldn't normally able to share in the things that we do. We're very strongly committed to the fact that we do some amazing stuff at this place. We have people who are very keen on sharing their knowledge with the world, and this is an avenue by which we want to do this, and that's very important to us. Well, thank you very much. It has come in parallel with that. Our iTunes U project and our FutureLearn MOOCs project have both been running in parallel over the last year, and I think also it's difficult to say whether it's whether one has driven the other. There's no doubt about it that we are entering a time into which learning and teaching and technology enhanced learning has got a higher profile now at the university than it has done for a long time. Our colleague Fazana, who also was in earlier on, who may want to comment, our excellent team leader in the Technology Enhanced Learning team, organised a fantastic Technology Enhanced Learning Festival, which was attended by several hundred delegates over the summer period. We have a learning and teaching conference that runs. Thanks very much, Tracy. Thanks for coming. Thanks, James, as well. We also run an annual learning and teaching conference, which has been going for the last 4 or 5 years. When it started about 5 years ago, we were getting about 150 delegates. We ran it this January this year on the theme of technology enhanced learning. We had nearly 700 delegates. So there's clearly a huge increase, I think, in awareness of this. Sheffield University is one of those universities, like many pre-92 universities. It talks about being a research university, although when you actually look at how it works, 65% of our annual turnover is student generated from fees, from learning and teaching revenue. And I think people are starting to understand now that this is absolutely core to our activities and requires the appropriate level of attention. So anybody else got any other questions? It's been a great session, and thanks very much for coming. I'm amazed that you've all stuck it to the end as well. Thanks, Linda. A couple more questions there, Javid. Thank you very much for that. We did talk about this earlier on, but not to worry if I didn't make it very clear. We do in fact have a number of YouTube channels. In fact, at the University of Sheffield, I think we have about 30 or 40 different YouTube channels. YouTube's fantastic, but it's a pretty wild world out there. So the thing about YouTube is it's so vast. It's not always easy to get yourself visible, if you like. The other thing about YouTube is that it is full of lots of other distractions, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But as Peter Scott, who's the head of the Open University's Knowledge Media Institute, said at a conference a couple of years ago, he was talking about the difference between YouTube and iTunes, and they also use both. And he said YouTube's great, but he said the one thing you've got to remember about YouTube is you're only one click away from someone's dog on a skateboard. And I like dogs, so I'm not so bothered about skateboarding. And videos of dogs on skateboards are no doubt very funny, but you might want to ask yourself whether you actually want to have your primary academic content next to that. So if I wanted to make a series of videos about teaching medical students how to deal with the sort of soft personal skills that one would need to handle counselling people for bereavement, would I really want a video about that sitting next to somebody's dog running around a skate park? You know, it's possibly not appropriate. The other thing about YouTube is it's often blocked in China. You can't see the forest for the trees on YouTube. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, very good. Cheers, Will. See you soon, mate. Always good to see you virtually, even if it's some text chat. Hope we catch up soon. That's absolutely right. Also, YouTube content is not always easy to access in China. In fact, it's quite often blocked. And the other thing is this downloadable factor too. So iTunes U is based around a downloading podcast model. You can subscribe to the content, you can download it to your device, and then you can access that content when you are not in an area of connectivity, which again, if you're out in the field or you're on the bus or whatever, you can't always guarantee that. There was another question. Will asked us about whether, and Will's gone now, but we don't know yet whether our iTunes U project has raised raised the level of somebody got this about entry. Oh, sorry, Shara again. Increased inquiries. I don't know that yet. We know that the MOOCs claim to have got some of this yet, but we don't know about iTunes U yet. I think we're just going to have to let that one cook away for a bit. It's nice to think that if A-level students were searching for some interesting resources to help them, you know, I keep thinking about this engineering maths example because there's so many people study maths and engineering. I'd like to think that if students whether A-level students or undergraduate students, came and used our content, and that helped them with their studies, that if they wanted to pursue further studies, that it might be something that would make them think of Sheffield. I would just do please go and have a look at the examples. The examples, I actually shared a document out with Catherine. I hope that she's managed to let you see that. I've put a little pedagogical explanation in with each one. As I said, the idea was to show some of the diversity of material that we've got, and the diversity of approaches that you can take. If we have any more questions, do please type them in. Otherwise, I think perhaps we may need to think about drawing it to a close. Thank you again for being so generous with your time in terms of staying for so long, because I realise that we've gone over 25 minutes. Oh, hold on, Hansa, sorry. Hamza asked me, I wonder if you've evaluated audience experience using such a medium. Not directly yet. Now, I know the Open University have done a bit of work in this area a while ago. It's because you don't really control the iTunes U environment, it's difficult to sort of put a survey in or anything like that. Thank you very much, Stephen. That's very kind of you, sir. Thank you for listening in. It does bear investigation, this Hamza, very much so. The Open University, as I understand it, although Sally may know different, are the only people I think I know who have published a paper where they've really evaluated the user experience of iTunes U, both in terms of trying to find out really who's coming in, and also what their examples of it are. So I have to confess, at this moment in time, we don't have any direct evaluation of this. Thanks very much, Hazel. Thank you for coming. Oh, thank you, Hamza. That's very kind of you. That's great to. I wish we could have had this face to face, because we could have so much more discussion. But maybe we will get a chance to at some point in the future. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Joey. Yeah, I think it definitely would be something we could perhaps have a look at further, or rather bears further discussion. Oh, would, yeah, absolutely. We've got a Mousing event in Nottingham on the 20th of January. I don't know if anybody's around for that. We'll have an opportunity to discuss more, actually. Yes, Stephen, we are actually, on the 20th of January, we're going to discuss, we're having an iTunes U session for 1 hour. I'm hoping Sally's going to be there, and I think Teresa Bird from Leicester's going to be there. Melsick, indeed, yeah. Good, excellent, good. I'm pleased to hear that. That's great. That's great news. That's great news. Gemma, let me find out. I'm going to go onto my browser for a moment. I'll see if I can get the. I'm going to get that information for you now, because I see that's something you want to find out about. Well, that says October the 30th. Oh, it's this one. Right. Okay, folks. Oh, wow, did it fill up? Gosh. Okay, this is the actual thing. Okay, so I'll just put that in the old cheers, Joel. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Javid. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you soon. Okay, folks, I'm going to draw the meeting down to a conclusion now. Has anybody got any last questions? Otherwise, do please contact me should you wish to. This email address, g.mcelerney@sheffield.ac.uk.